Hey everyone! If you enjoyed this video, the full version is available on Patreon. I'll be uploading all my content there going forward.
Pei Yuan transmigrated to the world of the boys, becoming a mentally ill person in a lab rat at the Vought Group's experimental base. With the lamplighter lurking in the distance and the racial storm queen casting a disdainful glance from behind, he felt a little panicked. Fortunately, at the crucial moment, he obtained the Multiverse Role-Playing System. As long as he gained role-playing points, he could become the day of destruction for the human world. First, he obtained the destruction ray. When Pei Yuan stood in front of the people of the motherland and shot out his heat gaze. Homelander roars, "What kind of superhero are you?" Pei Yuan grinned cruelly, "I specialize in killing Superman. Spitting blood extinguishes stars, thermal vision melts everything, dragging planets with bare hands, interstellar leaps in the human body." Pei Yuan, who accomplished all of this, said, "You might not believe it, but I was a lunatic back then." Chapter 1. His heart rate has dropped below the minimum, Professor Carlton. Give him adrenaline. Mentor, it's not working. Then throw it back in the room, Legrand. Move on to the next one, reduce the compound dosage by 5%. Pennsylvania, the heart of the philosopher's forest. This is a secretive mental hospital located in a remote suburb of the city, a subsidiary of a global health organization. In a cramped room with only a toilet and a sink, an Asian youth, barefoot and wearing a white long-sleeved shirt, sat somewhat blankly on a single bed. "This is unbelievable. The absurdity of time travel actually happened to me." The Asian youth glanced around with a strange look in his eyes, then looked down at his somewhat unfamiliar body, looking bewildered and confused. However, the extra memory in his mind clearly told Pei Yuan that he had indeed transmigrated into the body of this guy with the exact same name as him. The only difference is that this guy was mentally ill, and as his condition worsened, he was transferred to a mental hospital called the Sage's Jungle Center. And so, is this guy mentally ill? And this Sage's Forest Center sounds familiar, like I've seen it at some water group before. Wait, the water group? The moment the word appeared unconsciously in my mind, a strange and chaotic memory surged up from my head. While rubbing his head, Pei Yuan sorted through the memories in his mind and quickly figured everything out. Have I transmigrated, or have I transmigrated into the world of the boys, or even into the body of a lab rat testing drugs for the Vought Corporation? Recalling everything in his mind, Pei Yuan found it somewhat unbelievable. Pei Yuan was naturally familiar with the Vought Group. In the world of the boys, the Vought Corporation has been dedicated to researching compounds that can produce superhumans, which led to the creation of the Seven, a superhero group with diverse abilities. Among them, the Homelanders are the strongest fighters. The Vought Group is not content with its current situation and continues to research and refine Compound V, which is used to manufacture superhumans, in an effort to resolve the instability issues when injected into adults. Pharmaceutical research institutes exist, and naturally, lab rats are used in pharmaceutical manufacturing. One of the Vought Group's subsidiaries, the Sage's Jungle Center Mental Hospital, was secretly developed into a research facility, where orphaned mental patients transferred there became their perfect guinea pigs. Unfortunately, Pei Yuan was also one of them, but unfortunately, his predecessor was removed from office as the subject of this experiment. Thinking about all this, Pei Yuan felt completely uneasy. Being in the Vought Group's test base, the level of danger here was at its maximum. Pei Yuan had already witnessed the instability of compound number 5 through fragmented memories in his predecessor's mind. 90% of mentally ill people died directly due to the effects of compound number 5. The remaining 10% also experienced various problems due to the side effects. Some had turbulent skin, some had their heads turn into speakers, some turned into puddles of water, and some had their testicles burning hot like branding irons. Compound number 5 is even more mysterious than a blind box. The path to becoming a superhuman is not so smooth. The appearance of an ordinary superhuman would leave behind piles of corpses at his feet. But escape? Recalling the memories in his mind, Pei Yuan felt an endless despair. There were impenetrable prison cells in front of him, the hospital staffed with former Super 7 lamplighters to control emergencies and destroy evidence, and layers of defenses. How could this mentally ill man with absolutely no superpowers escape? How could he leave this prison? He had no way to leave this wall or this iron gate. Are we really going to stay here and become a stiff white mouse in the hands of those people after finally getting a chance to live? Pei Yuan sat blankly on the wall, staring at the tiny window, looking dazed. Wait a minute. It seems like some strange things have gotten mixed in. Oh no, have I really gone insane? Pei Yuan blinked as he looked at a square frame that had suddenly appeared on the wall in front of him. Finding that the semi-transparent frame was still there, he simply closed his eyes. However, the thing followed him like a shadow, moving with his eyes as if it were engraved on his retina. The semi-transparent frame emitted a soft glow, and there seemed to be text on it. Numerous movie, novel, and anime settings flashed through Pei Yuan's mind. He paused, then stared intently, trying to make out the text on the frame. Suddenly, those blurry pieces of information appeared silently on his retina. Ding dong! Pressure detected, system is on its way. The multiverse role-playing system is loading. Loading successful. Role being transferred. As the progress bar appeared on the screen, Pei Yuan felt the surrounding environment suddenly go dark. My consciousness blurred for a moment, and I suddenly found myself in an unknown world, as if in a dream. This world has no light, no sound, only a desolate, empty darkness. Pei Yuan felt as if he had been pulled into an endless, lightless deep sea, or a desolate, lifeless deep space of the universe. Then, he saw an unknown being imprisoned here. It has a giant body that is over 3 meters tall and sturdy, with strong muscle fibers exposed as if poured with molten iron, and a hard, grayish-white exoskeleton that covers almost its entire body. From the tip of the fist to the spine, rows of hideous and terrifying bone spurs protrude. Just one glance is enough to make you feel that this is the most powerful killing machine in history, the one that should never have existed in the world, a synonym for destruction. And so, am I playing Doomsday? Doomsday Superman, the end of all things, Ragnarok, and the demise of gods on earth. Pei Yuan's gaze froze, his heart pounding like a drumbeat echoing in this unknown space. Suddenly, the unknown being opened its eyes, its gaze empty as if it could absorb everything, shaking all the gods and spirits. The next moment, the system finished loading notification sounded, and Pei Yuan's consciousness was immediately pulled back to reality, back to the cramped room. But at this moment, Pei Yuan's mindset has changed. As long as he has a little bit of Doomsday's power, can this lousy mental hospital still hold him back? He couldn't wait any longer and opened the panel, where a semi-transparent information box appeared in his sight. Doomsday template loaded successfully. Current role, Doomsday. Template unlock progress, 0.0%. Ability, unlocked when template progress reaches 5.0%. Playing value, 0. It really was Doomsday. Pei Yuan felt relieved upon seeing the information on the panel, but he couldn't help but frown when he saw that the 2 columns for ability/role value were empty. The ability obviously needs to be unlocked by playing a role to reach the next stage, but how do you get this role value? Chapter 2. After loading the role of the target, Pei Yuan began to think about how to play Doomsday. As the name suggests, acting involves various degrees of acting, including physical actions and language, and it increases acting value points. The most significant aspect of Doomsday is, of course, destruction. However, the scenes of Doomsday were so devastating that they destroyed the heavens and the earth, and killed countless powerful beings. Now, with no weapons and limited abilities, he simply cannot replicate them. Just as Pei Yuan was racking his brains trying to figure out how to break the deadlock and increase his role-playing value, a notification sound suddenly rang in his mind. Playing value +1. Pei Yuan was taken aback and subconsciously opened the system panel. He saw that the number in the role value column had changed and was now a lone 1. Although it is a small step in numbers, it is a giant leap in history. Unfortunately. However, there was no further increase, and Pei Yuan spent a long time trying to figure out where the role-playing value came from. He couldn't help but carefully recall his previous actions, remembering that before his performance value increased, he seemed to have flicked his wrist. Thinking of all this, he immediately sat back down in his previous spot, then, as always, flicked his wrist and rested it on the edge of the bed, while keeping an eye on his arm. Within a few minutes, the notification sound of playing value increased by 1 came again. Pei Yuan looked down at a ray of sunlight shining on the back of his hand through the narrow window. His gaze paused for a moment, and after a brief thought, he understood. So, you gain performance points by absorbing sunlight? Similar to Doomsday Superman absorbing stellar energy and transforming it into this form? In the subsequent tests, Pei Yuan verified this idea. So his whole body squeezed into that narrow patch of sunlight, absorbing its energy to play a role. Wanting to get more sunlight, Pei Yuan stretched both hands above his head, palms facing outwards, and stood upright. Try to immerse your entire body in the sunlight, so that your posture looks as bizarre as possible. Playing value +2. Current role value, 13. At that moment, Pei Yuan had no time to pay attention to this. Seeing the completely different changes in the numbers on the panel, he was immediately overjoyed. After immersing himself in the sunlight, his performance efficiency indeed improved. So he straightened his body and persisted in the stiff posture. Playing value +2. Playing value +1. Playing value +2. Despite the constant system notifications and the minutiae of progress, Pei Yuan was still filled with excitement. In just a short while, the time has increased by dozens of points. At this rate, there should be enough time. Once it reaches 5%, the corresponding superpower will be unlocked. Thinking about the vast world outside, Pei Yuan became more and more enthusiastic in imitating. Hey, Paul, look what that yellow-skinned monkey is doing. It looks so funny. Doesn't its movement look like a duck stretching its neck out? Haha. Inside the monitoring room, a man in a guard uniform patted the white man next to him and gestured with a mocking look to show him the surveillance footage. Attack, which superhuman is he imitating? Paul looked hesitant as he watched the Asian man's movements on the monitor. Hey, this yellow-skinned monkey is lucky to be alive. He woke up and started causing trouble, imitating some superhuman. It can't be imitating the lamplighter, can it? That freak of a lamplighter is one thing, but he doesn't seem that stupid. Art laughed as he watched Pei Yuan's actions on the monitor. Paul shushed him. "ATT, are you out of your mind? Don't talk nonsense, the lamplighter is still here. What's there to be afraid of? That freak just went to the cafeteria," Art said nonchalantly. Paul knew that Art had been raped by a fat superhuman, and since then he hated superhumans and spoke without restraint. Fearing he might say something even more shocking, Paul quickly changed the subject. This guy wasn't like this before, isn't this a bit abnormal? Before he could finish speaking, he saw Ate looking at him with a very peculiar gaze, which made Paul feel stunned, wondering what he had said wrong. "Boer, have you been working too long and been brainwashed by those pathetic idiots? Have you forgotten where you are? This is a mental hospital. That guy is mentally ill. It's only right that he's not normal. Oh, I must have lost my mind." Hearing Art's laughter and curses, Paul realized how ridiculous his thoughts were, actually doubting the mental illness of someone. Does a mentally ill person even need to be questioned? To suspect that someone with a mental illness is abnormal is absurd. Isn't it normal for someone with a mental illness to be abnormal? All right, take a look at the monitor. I need to prepare lunch for those poor guys. Seeing Paul slapping his head in frustration, Art smiled, shrugged, and walked out. Inside the room, Pei Yuan continued his tireless practice, and the area exposed to more sunlight received more attention in his performance. While Pei Yuan persisted in this action, the performance progress of the performance value conversion also became 0.8%. The effect value increased by each irradiation can almost always be maintained at the level of 2, and even reaches 3 a few times. The intense irradiation and stiff movements took a toll on my physical strength, not to mention the previous injuries I had. Pei Yuan stopped his stiff movements, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and sat down on the edge of the bed to rest against the wall. At that moment, a dark figure appeared in the doorway, and with a clang, the sturdy prison door was opened. When Pei Yuan looked over and saw that it was a burly white man in a security guard uniform, a loaf of bread was casually tossed in. The bread bounced on the ground, rolled a few times, and then turned into a dark, murky mess. Looking at the wrecked food, Pei Yuan couldn't help but feel anger, but he remained seated on the bed without moving. "Hey, poor yellow-skinned monkey, today is your lucky day, God bless you, hurry up and eat the bread I gave you." Looking at the motionless Asian youth in the room, ATT smirked and then kicked the bread in front of him. After the burly white man closed the door and left, Pei Yuan picked up the dusty bread and slowly wiped away the dust, a cold glint flashing in his eyes as he did so. He knew this burly white man, the security guard here, Art, was an ordinary person without superpowers who, after taking a job at the mental hospital, often took pleasure in bullying patients. Of course, it's about bullying ordinary patients who don't yet have superpowers. Those with superpowers wouldn't dare, let alone mentally ill patients with superpowers. As for the purpose, according to the staff's conversation, they suffered superhuman trauma. They dare not confront superhumans, so they can only bully these mentally ill people for fun, so that when a mentally ill person becomes a superhuman in the future, they can claim to have defeated a superhuman. Pei Yuan had been bullied by this guy before, and Pei Yuan vowed that when he got out, he would stuff this bread into that guy's anus if he had the chance. Chapter 3. Art, you shouldn't have gone into the room. That's the lamplighter's privilege. What if that guy awakens superpowers? In the monitoring room, Paul, who had just seen clearly what Yate had done through the surveillance cameras, couldn't help but issue a warning after Yate returned. "Haha, Paul, what kind of hellish joke are you talking about? Look at the remaining superhuman freaks here, aren't they all left over from a bunch of dead trash? This guy can become a superhuman? Bullshit, he's just a lucky guy." Art wore a mocking expression, completely disregarding Paul's suggestion. He's played with so many guys and opened so many cell doors, how could he not know which ones have superpowers? Even if that yellow-skinned monkey becomes capable, would that guy who always wets his pants in the lab dare to lay a hand on him? Seeing Ate's expression, Paul knew that further words were pointless, so he stopped talking. Art, feeling lazy, sat back down in front of the monitor, his eyes constantly scanning the various screens, intently searching for something amusing. His gaze lingered most often in one man's room. That man had a very large penis. He disliked superhumans, but he didn't dislike a man with a very large penis. Pei Yuan swallowed the bread covered in black ash, then drank a few mouthfuls of water from the tap. Although it was hard to swallow, he had no other choice at the moment. After resting to replenish his energy, Pei Yuan once again followed the meager sunlight, striking poses that maximized the area exposed to it. Although the actions looked rather comical and bizarre, and although he knew there were surveillance cameras in the room showing such scenes, but he didn't forget either. He's a complete lunatic now. In previous memories, the predecessor also had various strange actions or imitated others. Given his eccentric behavior and current identity, it's perfectly normal for him to act this way in this area. Without thinking about anything else, Pei Yuan focused entirely on following the sun's movements. His top priority now was to unlock the Doomsday skill. basking in the sunlight, tireless. For 2 days straight, except for the time when he was sleeping and there was no sunlight, Pei Yuan followed the movement of the sun, which can be described as being so engrossed in it that he forgot to eat and sleep. He would only rest for a while when his body became too stiff to hold on due to prolonged stiffness. The constant pressure here compelled him to have the ability to protect himself. The movements were strange and arduous, but in a life-or-death situation, they were doing it in order to survive. Even if playing a Homelander requires drinking milk in the Homelander style, he'd still go all out for the crescent moon sky-piercing rooftop of the building. He has now discovered that his current actions, when exposed to sunlight, have become a stable way to increase his role-playing value. Doomsday Role-Playing Progress 4.8%. Doomsday Role-Playing Progress 4.9%. With all his role-playing points invested in unlocking, he also increased the role-playing progress of the Doomsday panel to 5.0%. Stage progress achieved, superpower unlocked, destruction ray. Next stage skill unlock progress 20.0%. Ability. Destruction ray, LV1, 0.0%. Pei Yuan was overjoyed to discover that it was the heat rays of Doomsday. It's worth noting that Superman possesses abilities similar to Doomsday, and his heat rays are ridiculously powerful, capable of directly blasting planets apart when at their strongest. It's just a pity that he's only given it level 1 so far. With the slightest movement of his consciousness, Pei Yuan could feel a surge of heat in his eyes, as if they would emit a blazing red light at any moment. Pei Yuan knew there was a surveillance camera in the room monitoring his actions, which immediately suppressed his idea of conducting the experiment. However, according to the information transmitted by the system, he also learned that the power of his superheat ray was currently uncontrollable in size, but the temperature was as high as 1500 degrees Celsius, which was enough to melt most metals and steel. It was already so powerful from the start, not to mention Doomsday's unparalleled and almost terrifying growth potential. At this moment, Pei Yuan couldn't help but glance at the iron prison door of the room, but he suppressed his thoughts for the time being. Let's persevere a little longer and see if we can unlock Doomsday's superhuman strength. After all, he is still immortal, and bullets don't discriminate. There are also lamplighters outside. If he's not careful, he might just be done for. Another point he needs to figure out is whether Storm is still involved. Otherwise, given Storm's ability to fly, even if he escapes the asylum, he'll likely face a lot of trouble afterward. Inside the laboratory, Dr. Carlton, dressed in a white lab coat, was intently observing the test subject on the other side of the bulletproof glass. They were verifying the sample files from the previous test. But he was quickly interrupted by his assistant who arrived at the scene. Dr. Carlton, guess what the student just discovered? A young white man, also dressed in work clothes, rushed in. Dr. Carlton glanced at his assistant and student, shook his head, and said, "Rogrund, didn't anyone tell you that it's not a good time to keep things a secret in the lab? I'm not really interested in hearing it unless you tell me." Seeing that his message hadn't caught the teacher's attention, Rogrange seemed a little dejected. "Just now, Paul from the security department told me that the sample from last time is still alive." Carlton put down the file and adjusted his framed glasses. "You mean number 58? That Asian youth from last time?" Roger nodded. "Yes, it's that kid. I watched the surveillance footage, and he was still lively and energetic." "Professor, do you think it's possible that he has already adapted to this version of Compound 5 and become a superhuman? Any superhuman performances so far?" Roger thought of the mimicry the Asian youth, Paul, mentioned on the surveillance footage, and since he didn't seem to have any other abilities, he shook his head. "It seems like he's just been enjoying sunbathing for a few days now." Hearing this, Carlton patted Roger on the shoulder, "Then this is another lucky guy. Roger, I hope you can be more cautious and not jump to conclusions so easily. Observe for a while first. If there are no problems, bring him to the lab in 2 weeks for a larger dose of the compound. Hopefully, this lucky guy will bring us good fortune. Upon hearing Carlton's words, Legrand felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over him. Legrand has always felt honored to be able to participate in and improve Compound V, which has the potential to change the world and human history. However, despite the support of the Vought Group, the improvement plan for Compound V remained as bad as ever after several years. While it may be effective in infants, injecting it into adults will invariably result in freaks or even an explosion, with only a very small percentage developing superpowers. Legrand's spirit had been almost completely worn down by endless failures. Bang! One of the test subjects in the laboratory exploded on the other side of the bulletproof glass after being injected with a modified version of compound number 5. Blood and bits of flesh were smeared all over the glass, making the scene look horrific. Legrand's heart skipped a beat, but he found that his mentor Carlton seemed to be used to this scene. He simply glanced at it calmly, looked down at the documents, and seemed not to care. "Legrand, I think we should bring number 58, that Asian kid, over for a look. After all, anything is possible." Chapter 4. Yellow-skinned monkey, it seems your lucky holiday has ended prematurely. Pei Yuan was still chasing the sunlight inside the room when he heard a thud coming from the sturdy iron door. Looking in the direction of the sound, I saw Art grinning with a big white smile on his face outside the glass, a gloating expression on his face. At that moment, Ed opened the iron gate. "Come on, follow me to the lab." Art held a stun gun in his right hand, a playful smile on his face, tapping it repeatedly on his left palm, as if he intended to give him a stun if he disobeyed orders. Pei Yuan was somewhat surprised when he heard this. Based on past practice, Dr. Carlton's mice were replaced every 2 weeks, and today was only 10 days since his last replacement. Why did they repeat the experiment ahead of schedule? He was planning to stay put for a few more days. Pei Yuan pondered these questions and followed Yate out of the room, intending to see what was going on. Although escaping now would be quite risky, he was willing to give it a try if he wanted to conduct the experiment. If they get the chance, they'll blast the people inside to smithereens. The laboratory was located at the end of the corridor. Pei Yuan walked along the long corridor, his eyes casually observing the surroundings. Perhaps because of the presence of the lamplighters, the guards Pei Yuan saw were not very tight, and there were only a few armed guards. Of course, Pei Yuan wouldn't jump to conclusions so easily. However, after these few days, he learned from conversations with the corridor guards that Storm Girl had not yet begun to take charge of the Sage's jungle mental illness affairs. This was a rare piece of good news for Pei Yuan. "Hey, Dr. Carlton, do you need my help?" Pei Yuan had just entered the experiment when he heard the voice of a lamplighter coming from inside. "No need, it's just a physical examination for that Asian kid, number 58. You just need to keep an eye out for any emergencies," Dr. Carlton said, shaking his head. Upon entering the laboratory, Pei Yuan saw Dr. Carlton from his memories, along with 2 researchers in white coats, busily working in the room. A guard stood at the door, armed with what appeared to be tranquilizer guns to prevent accidents, while the lamplighter by the window was habitually fiddling with a lighter. Having watched movies and TV shows, Pei Yuan naturally knew about the lamplighter. It has to be said that the lamplighter was a ruthless and vicious person. During the time this mental hospital existed, many disobedient people were burned to ashes by the lamplighter. No matter how you look at it, this guy has blood on his hands and is a ruthless killer. I don't know where this TV show comes from with its sense of guilt, that it would feel ashamed of playing with fire and getting burned. At this moment, if he wanted to break the deadlock, the biggest threat he faced, besides the guns, was this lamplighter. Although this guy's fire-controlling superpower requires a source of fire, it doesn't detract from his overall strength. The lamplighter was able to step into Vought International and become a member of the Rising Super 7, so he must have some considerable abilities. However, this guy's physical fitness is probably just average. Pei Yuan's eyes inadvertently glanced at the heart area of the lamplighter. After Pei Yuan followed Yate into the laboratory, a young researcher in a white coat came over and said kindly, "Don't be nervous, we're just giving you a physical examination." He had no choice but to be amiable, as many of these mentally ill people were prone to outbursts of emotion and had no idea what would happen next. One of his colleagues' oxen was grabbed and twisted 3 times by a guy who suddenly appeared. If others had reacted quickly enough, this guy would probably have had to change careers. Pei Yuan just looked at him, wondering to himself whether this physical examination was a proper one. The young researcher then led him to a nearby area, not the previous isolation laboratory. Seeing that it was a normal medical examination device, Pei Yuan suppressed his urge to have an examination. After a thorough examination, Dr. Carlton followed in. "How is he? Is there anything wrong with his body?" "Doctor, not yet. He's recovering well, except for some cervical spondylosis, which is probably a problem he developed from years of working overtime before he was admitted to the mental hospital." The young researcher's answer clearly did not satisfy Dr. Carlton. He remained silent for a moment, then waved his hand and said, "No need to examine him anymore, send him back." The young researcher nodded, removed the devices from Pei Yuan's body that measured his heart rate, blood pressure, and so on, and then waved for it to take him back, as it was waiting at the door. Nothing unexpected happened during the journey, which naturally pleased Pei Yuan. Just as Pei Yuan reached the laboratory door, Dr. Carlton suddenly came over and blocked his way. "Art, Dr. Carlton!" Dr. Carlton waved his hand to signal him to be quiet, then stared intently into Pei Yuan's eyes before suddenly smiling and saying, "Number 58, can you tell me why you want to be exposed to sunlight?" Pei Yuan's heart skipped a beat upon hearing this, but he then glanced around furtively before lowering his voice and saying, "I'm plotting something big." "Oh, what's the big deal?" Carlton asked curiously. Not only were people curious, but even those in the lab were drawn to his mysterious behavior, wanting to hear what he had to say. "Pei Yuan, me? I want to plant the sun." "Carlton." Dr. Carlton's expression changed repeatedly, making him inwardly curse his own stupidity for actually engaging in serious communication with a mentally ill person. "Can I have a room with a big window?" Pei Yuan was still earnestly defending the legal rights of a mentally ill person. This made Carlton even angrier. "Take it away!" Dr. Carlton roared through gritted teeth, "I knew it! I knew it! How could I possibly develop a stable compound number 5 from these mentally unstable psychopaths? Are we going to use those unstable minds to stabilize things? I suggested long ago that Walter capture some homeless people. Those are the qualified test subjects." Inside the laboratory, Carlton's student Roger Lang and his assistants remained silent, not daring to provoke Dr. Carlton. The man by the window snapped off the lighter in his hand and chuckled. "Dr. Carlton, you should understand. It's not so easy to bring those homeless people from the city over. The military has always been keeping a close eye on Walter." Carlton could freely reprimand his assistants, but he was somewhat wary of this superhuman who could control fire and was once one of the 7's lamplighters. He glanced at the lamplighter, said nothing, and instead took off his white lab coat and stormed out of the laboratory. Chapter 5. "I have to say, you're quite capable, kid. You actually managed to make Dr. Carlton so angry. Thanks to you, it seems Dr. Carlton has already gone to the Water Corporation building. Those homeless people in the city are probably in for a rough time soon." On the way back to Pei Yuan's room, Art saw Dr. Carlton driving away through the corridor window and chuckled. Pei Yuan did not respond, clearly his wish for a room with large windows and strong sunlight had been dashed. Today was another sunny day, with good sunlight. Pei Yuan stood in the room through the small window, absorbing the limited amount of sunlight energy. Around noon, Pei Yuan learned another piece of information from the talkative Yate. Dr. Carlton seemed reluctant to use these mentally ill individuals for his experiments on Compound 5, believing that the slow progress of his experiments was due to the inferior quality of the test subjects. So I plan to stay at the Vought Group. So obviously, his time in the lab has been postponed again. Pei Yuan had plenty of time to play the role of the destroyer sunbathing, and then go back to play the role of the value. Role-playing value +1. Role-playing value +2. In the prison-like room, Pei Yuan's body and the slanting beam of light became a line, bathing his entire body in sunlight as much as possible. Pei Yuan's performance value on the panel was increasing rapidly at a constant rate. It has to be said that everything is easy at the beginning but difficult later. The amount of role points required to unlock the next skill at 10% progress is now multiplied by a factor of 2 compared to the first stage. Now, the only thing Pei Yuan can do is play the role of the sun destroyer, seizing every opportunity when the sunlight appears at the window. Even the guards in the security room shook their heads when they saw Pei Yuan's strange appearance. They would only think that this guy's mental illness was more serious and that he was almost obsessed. The rest of the days were like this, making him almost forget about time. Only when Yate or other staff delivered his meals each day did Pei Yuan realize how much time had passed. As the sun set and the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon, Pei Yuan, as usual, directly incorporated the day's performance gains into the performance schedule. This time, however, a different notification sound appeared than usual. Unlock progress has reached 10%. Unlock abilities, achieve superhuman strength. A strange heat flowed through his limbs and bones, transforming his body. Pei Yuan was stunned for a moment, then opened the panel and saw the extra line of text in the ability column. His joy was beyond words. He immediately checked the current strength of this super strong body. Upon checking, he discovered that Pei Yuan was now immune to attacks from ordinary weapons, and even had a certain degree of immunity to bullets. Although Pei Yuan felt regretful that he couldn't be completely immune to bullets, his current physical strength gave him much more confidence in escaping this place. Protecting against bullets is one purpose, but an even more important one is to protect against tranquilizer guns that shoot out from the darkness. After all, in order to prevent mental patients from escaping, these guard rooms are equipped with a number of tranquilizer guns, which are quieter than ordinary firearms, and always make people feel annoyed. For the next few days, no one took Pei Yuan to the lab to do experiments, so he stayed in his room, basking in the sun to increase his acting value. Dr. Carlton in the lab seems to be at odds with the higher UPS at the Vought Group. Half a month has passed since Pei Yuan conducted the last experiment, and there is still no sign of Dr. Carlton returning. The best way for me to leave is obviously the route to the laboratory, since I don't need to waste time breaking through the iron gate and going through several layers of defenses to reach the gate. Because of the camera, he didn't even have time to practice his own destructive ray, and he didn't know how long it would take to break through. As time passed, Pei Yuan continued to absorb the acting points given by the sunlight during the day, while also inquiring about the security measures within the mental hospital, all while waiting for his second opportunity to conduct the experiment. He has already decided. If nothing unexpected happens, he plans to wait until his next trip to the lab, when he passes the gate guards, and then take the opportunity to escape. The role-playing points acquired in the past few days are still being used, but the progress required to unlock them has increased even further. So Pei Yuan simply decided to keep them for now and save them to upgrade his skills. As for escaping this mental hospital, having the destructive ray and the superhuman strength is enough, since the top superhumans from the Vought Group are still inside the Vought building. 2 more days passed. One night, after Pei Yuan had eaten that unpalatable food, he rested on the bed. However, just as he was drifting off to sleep, a crisp sound of a door opening startled him awake. Pei Yuan suddenly opened his eyes and saw the iron gate open, and a familiar white figure walked in from outside. It was the burly white man, Et. Pei Yuan was puzzled. Dinner has already been delivered, what does this guy want to do at this hour? However, upon seeing Pei Yuan stand up, a lewd smile appeared on Et's face. This smile was exactly the same as the smile of a lecherous thief towards an innocent girl that Pei Yuan had seen on television. The only difference is that the role of that naive girl has now been taken by myself. Hee, kid, you haven't done this before, have you? I'll make you feel good today. As Yate walked into the room, he saw Pei Yuan's expression and became even more lewd and disgusting. Pei Yuan had no idea that this guy was actually gay. Inside the security room, Boar, who was on night shift, also noticed Yate's actions in the room. He shook his head speechlessly, pressed a button, and moved the camera away from his position. The camera's activity naturally couldn't escape the notice of it, who was inside the room. He glanced up, shook his head with regret, and sighed, "Boring guy." He then turned to Pei Yuan inside the room, chuckled, and pulled down his pants. "Let me show you my baby." "Oh, what do you think?" Pei Yuan rubbed his eyes, stood in front of Yate, and said calmly. This eerily calm tone suddenly sent chills down Art's spine. He had a bad feeling and roared, "Shit, what else do you want, you yellow-skinned monkey?" Pei Yuan stood there expressionless, curling his lip in disgust. Then his eyes suddenly turned red, and to At's astonishment, 2 blazing red rays flashed past his crotch. In an instant, a flash of red light disappeared in an instant, and the smell of something burning seemed to waft through the room. At froze with a look of utter disbelief, then collapsed to the ground. His legs straightened, his facial features contorted almost instantly, his face turned ashen, and then quickly turned deathly pale. His strong body curled up like a boiled shrimp, his hands instinctively wanting to cover himself, yet he dared not. That thing is now like a pile of sand, if you touch it, it will turn into black dust. The intense pain caused him to break out in a cold sweat, and he felt as if his soul had left his body. He opened his mouth, wanting to scream, but could only let out a silent, dry howl. Chapter 6. I saw it, and then what? Pei Yuan stared calmly into At's eyes. However, at this moment, At was unable to answer. He was filled with endless pain and could not hear anything else. He stared at Pei Yuan's figure, his face contorted with pain, his body trembling, and the incomprehensible heat rays filling his eyes with terror. He doesn't understand. I can't understand it either. Pei Yuan didn't expect the other party to understand. He glanced at the pitch-black, carbonized thing called it, and a playful smile appeared on his lips. With a snap, stomp down. The thing instantly crumbled like loose sand, turning into black ash scattered all over the ground. Pei Yuan stepped over At's body, stomped his foot on the ground in disgust, and sighed, "If you can't hold on to something, you might as well just let it go." Art stared incredulously at the black ash on the ground between his legs, his eyes vacant. His pain paused for a moment before the pain response arc finally reached his vocal cords without stopping. What? A scorching heat beam shot directly into his head, hissing as it encountered moisture, melting him into a lump of dark brown charcoal solid. Pei Yuan delivered the finishing blow. He didn't want some kind of absurd king or other superhuman vengeful figure to emerge later. At this moment, the bright, flickering light coming from Pei Yuan's room in the monitoring room also caught Bo Er's attention. He frowned. Although he didn't want to see the battle scene in Atlantis, he still controlled the camera to move back to its original position. This look. He happened to witness Pei Yuan's destructive ray piercing through At's head, which stunned him instantly. Oh shit, what the hell? Next moment, a beam of intense light shot directly onto the screen, plunging it into complete darkness. Paul was so frightened that he fell to the ground, a wave of fear washing over him. Then, he suddenly realized what was happening, staggered to his feet, and used all his strength to slam down the red button on the table. The piercing alarm sounded throughout the entire mental hospital. Knowing that speed was of the essence, Pei Yuan, who was determined to go all the way, unleashed scorching heat rays from his eyes, relentlessly destroying the cell doors holding mental patients. In the end, he became more and more skilled at using his heat rays, and was able to easily hit the iron lock on the prison door and melt it. Taking advantage of the chaos, Pei Yuan also approached the building's exit. What the hell is going on at this hour? Can't those guards be a little more attentive? Grinned, who was looking at a report in the lab across from him, put down his documents with a grumbling tone when he heard the piercing alarm. Open the door and see what those damn guys are up to. Halfway there, they saw a figure in the corridor ahead, and the person opened an iron gate, the glaring red light around their eyes gradually disappearing. The two looked at each other. Legrand's body froze. Roger still remembered that Asian figure. He seemed to be number 58, the guy with the tongue-twisting Chinese name, Pei. But what is happening now? It seems the other person really does have superpowers. Roger's eyes fell on the rooms in the corridor where the locks had been broken and opened, and when he saw the guy in front of him, Roger's heart skipped a beat. Seeing the Asian youth looking over, Roger Lang forced a friendly smile. It's so late at night, are you out for a walk? Tomorrow, I'll have the caregiver arrange a room with a big window for you. Pei Yuan continued to stare at him. Legrand felt a little panicked. You see, he had never panicked when he attended a research conference and faced a barrage of questions from the top executives of the Vought Group. He didn't panic when he encountered the 7, who were superpowered. But when he saw number 58, he finally panicked. To know. He was still facing some people ahead. There's also human logic. But he's facing a real mental patient now. Still. A mentally ill person with superpowers. No one wanted to face a guy like this. The veins on Roger's forehead were throbbing, and his back was covered in a layer of sweat. Oh dear, I suddenly remembered I forgot to take a file from the office. Roger slapped his forehead as if suddenly realizing something, then turned around and walked towards the laboratory at the back, looking as if he had really forgotten something. Next moment, a scorching heat beam pierced through Lagrange's chest, creating a huge hole. Roger looked down at his charred chest, smelled the acrid odor, and before collapsing, a self-deprecating smile appeared on his face. The piercing alarm echoed over the mental hospital, waking everyone from the endless night. Countless lights illuminated the surroundings, and a constant cacophony of noises filled the air. Shadows swayed everywhere, and the scene was utter chaos. What? Seal off. Seal it off immediately. The scene became even more chaotic as the other trapped superhuman psychopaths wandered around. Because of the bizarre and wonderful skills of those superhumans, some of them don't even know how they died. They saw one of their companions suddenly explode into a shower of blood and flesh, and another companion's brain being corroded by saliva. I even witnessed a companion being whipped to death by a mentally ill man named Niu Niu, who was as large as a python. Oh, that scene! It lingered in their minds. Damn it, where's the tranquilizer gun? Get me the tranquilizer gun now. Hasn't the lamplighter arrived yet? Before Pei Yuan reached the end of the corridor, 2 armed guards appeared in front of him, their dark gun barrels pointed directly at him. Don't move. I'll shoot if you move again. However, before the other party could finish speaking, Pei Yuan's eyes flashed red, and he activated the destruction ray. 2 blazing beams of light shot out like cannonballs. The air was thick with the smell of burning, the 2 guards had lost their heads. Wilson, the security chief who rushed to the monitoring room, was also dumbfounded when he saw what happened on the screen. Isn't this thing supposed to be a patent of our own people? How come this mentally ill person also has it? What the hell did that damn doctor create? He immediately grabbed the walkie-talkie and roared, B-sector passage. B-sector passage, watch out for number 58, the target has laser eyes. Change tactics. Everyone put away your tranquilizer guns. Shoot them dead on sight. He no longer cared about the fact that this was Walter's valuable asset or its research value. If he didn't kill him outright, his men would probably all be wiped out in a single encounter. Now, with the blessing of the destructive ray, Pei Yuan is practically unstoppable, killing any guards who appear in front of him with a single glare. If one glare isn't enough, then 2 glares will do. There were bullets that hit him along the way, but they were all blocked by his superhuman strength. Although his body was swollen and red, he managed to stop the bullets. It's clear that his current level is too low, but it's enough for him to withstand fatal damage. The superhumans in the mental hospital scattered, and the entire experimental base was in chaos. Pei Yuan successfully approached the building's exit. He walked straight to the gate, his hands trembling slightly, his heart pounding with excitement. After opening this gate and passing through the next one, he would soon be free. Bang! The door was violently pushed open, and dazzling, scorching light squeezed in through the crack. Pei Yuan's pupils shrank, and the sudden burst of fire left him no time to react. The scorching flames struck his body, and he was thrown into the air by the immense force, crashing into the wall. In a fleeting moment, Pei Yuan caught a glimpse of the lamplighter. Chapter 7. The scorching flames danced across his body, and Pei Yuan could even feel the flames flowing through his skin. Because the flame was fleeting, it only felt very hot, but there was no burning sensation yet. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the person holding the lighter with a serious expression. Pei Yuan simply closed his eyes and lay motionless in the ruins on the ground. His charred appearance eased the tension of the arriving lamplighter somewhat, but he still dared not let his guard down. Superhumans cannot be judged by ordinary standards. This guy is a bit troublesome. I'm going to make him experience what it feels like to offend me. Seeing Pei Yuan lying motionless on the ground, a black guard smiled with satisfaction and took a baton from a guard beside him. He walked up with a cruel expression. If I were you, I wouldn't go near him at this time. The lamplighter beside him glanced at him and said. The black guard paused upon hearing this, thought for a moment, and said, "What you said makes some sense." After saying that, he stopped and switched the stun gun in his hand from the guard next to him with a rifle. He then shot Pei Yuan Lai, who was lying on the ground and unaware of his identity, several times. Depend on. It's swollen. Pei Yuan could already feel the bullet's impact point, and the swelling and pain rushed towards him. His plan to feign unconsciousness or death, waiting for the lamplighter to get close enough to give him a good whack on the head, ultimately failed. He simply stopped pretending and opened his eyes, flashing 2 laser-like eyes at the lamplighter's position. The lamplighter, who had been paying attention to Pei Yuan's movements, reacted quickly. The intense light made his hair stand on end, and he narrowly avoided the other person before their eyes turned red. Seeing the iron gate that had melted into a heap beside him, the lamplighter's face turned grim. Such powerful heat rays reminded him of his former teammate, Homelander, who was probably injured or killed if he got too close. Moreover, the opponent's body had probably been strengthened for some reason, as he took a huge fireball from him and appeared to be completely unharmed, with only black ash from his clothes that hadn't burned off. The lamplighter was alert and reacted quickly, but the black guard wasn't so lucky. Pei Yuan's destructive ray swept across the black guard's waist, instantly carbonizing everything in its path. The black guard let out a pitiful scream, instinctively firing a burst of inaccurate bullets, and fell to the ground, lifeless. Bang! A burst of flame erupted from the corner of the wall. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the lamplighter held the fuel lighter upright in front of him, using his other hand to control the large area of flame that erupted. The entire hall was ablaze with red, the intense heat making one feel as if they were in a furnace. Pei Yuan's eyes surged with heat, glowing with a ring of red light, and 2 terrifying rays shot out again, aimed at the arm holding the lighter. Without a source of fire, the lamplighter's abilities become useless. The lamplighter was clearly aware of this and didn't want to lose an arm, so when he saw Pei Yuan's eyes turn bloodshot, he quickly withdrew his arm. With the flames gone, Pei Yuan became even more reckless and rushed directly towards the location of the lit lamp. The heat vision kept scanning the location of the lamplighter, preventing him from showing himself the entire time. The lamplighter was covered in sweat, cursing that damned Carlton for creating such a damn thing. This guy has laser eyes and a body that can stop bullets. Apart from not being able to fly, what's the difference between him and Homelander? If there's any difference, it's that this guy's laser beam is probably weaker than Homelander's, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to hide behind a wall for so long. While adjusting his position to avoid the laser eyes, the lamplighter kept an eye on number 58's movements, as the other person approached a corner. It's now. With a flick of his right hand, the flame on the lighter suddenly enlarged as if it had been injected with gasoline additive. Then, under the control of the lamplighter, it shot out in that direction, like a fiery python that seemed to devour everything. However, the next moment, a huge jet of water hit the kerosene lighter in his hand with perfect accuracy. Puff! The flames that had been touching the water suddenly went out, and the rootless fires naturally vanished instantly as well. Looking at the fire hose in Pei Yuan's hand, the person lighting the lamp was completely dumbfounded. The man who had realized what was happening quickly tried to light the kerosene lighter, but the tinder was waterlogged and the lighter only produced sparks from the friction of the flint. Shit! You think I only have one lighter? The lamplighter roared, dodging the direction of the water jet, and pulled a spare kerosene lighter from his pocket. However, Pei Yuan smiled dismissively, twisted the nozzle of the fire hose, changed the caliber to the smallest, and directly expanded the coverage area of the water jet. The lamplighter was completely drenched in water, and the flame that had just been lit in his hand was extinguished by the jet of water with a whoosh. I was dumbfounded when I turned on the light. He suddenly regretted using the seemingly sophisticated kerosene lighter. Seeing that the two lighters in his hands were now useless, the lamplighter gritted his teeth, turned around, and ran towards another office building. Without his superpowers, he's now only slightly stronger than an average person. However, Pei Yuan was not about to let this troublesome fellow leave. His gaze sharpened, and two scarlet rays of destruction shot out. The bullet landed on the lamplighter's back, piercing right through him. The charred hole in his body was so clear that one could see the faint light coming from inside the house ahead. The lamplighter lay on the ground, unable to comprehend until his death how a mentally ill person, a superhuman, could actually think of using a fire hose against him. This is fucking absurd. With the lamplighter dead, Pei Yuan's escape journey suddenly had one less major obstacle, and the remaining defense forces were no threat at all. After charring the few clueless guys, Pei Yuan quickly approached the parking space, where some staff cars were parked. At this moment, due to the chaos in the building, many of the escaped superhuman building assassins who were originally mentally ill, as well as researchers who sensed that the situation was not good, rushed to the parking spaces to prepare to drive away. The key, where is my key? A female researcher ran frantically to the car but couldn't find the keys. When she finally managed to shakily pull the keys out of her bag and was about to open the door, a figure stood in front of me. Give me the key. Pei Yuan stared at her with reddened eyes, gesturing. The female researcher was terrified upon seeing this person, her body going limp as she collapsed to the ground. No, no, don't kill me. I was forced. Pei Yuan looked at the tearful female researcher and sighed, is that so? Then I feel sorry for you too. Yes, 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 the female researcher was overjoyed. But what's it to me? A crimson, scorching heat vision filled the female researcher's pupils. Pei Yuan ignored the female researcher's sobs and, after asking if he had any GPS tracking devices on him, gave her a shot. Then he snatched the keys from her hand, opened the car door, got in, inserted the key, and started the engine. This guy ultimately claimed he was forced, but he was anything but hesitant when it came to giving injections to those struggling patients. Bang bang bang! Bullets kept flying in. The vehicle and its hood were riddled with holes. Pei Yuan slammed on the gas pedal, and the car sped straight toward the gate. Along the way, the destructive rays in his eyes kept targeting the cars in the parking spaces on both sides, aiming at the fuel tanks, and blasting those cars to pieces. Boom! The fragile metal gate was smashed open, and Pei Yuan's car sped onto the road, disappearing into the desolate night amidst a hail of bullets. Chapter 8. Damn it! Catch up with him now! Watching Pei Yuan drive away, Wilson, the head of the mental hospital, roared at his remaining subordinates. Sir, all our vehicles have been destroyed by laser eye number 58. We have no vehicles left. It will take time to get vehicles from other places. The guard, sweating profusely, hurriedly explained to the person in charge. Damn it, damn it! Wilson, the person in charge, slammed his fist on the wall, his expression shifting between anger and uncertainty. The escape of Experiment 58, a superhuman with laser eyes, made him imagine the fury of the Vought Corporation for such an important asset. Whose car is that? Locate it. And report this to Vought for backup. Looking at the ruins and the guards still cleaning up the mess, Wilson gritted his teeth and gave the order. Ah, my hand, my hand! A guard hurriedly ran out of the building. His arm, like melting ice and snow, revealed horrifyingly white bones, causing him to scream in agony. Wilson's expression changed drastically when he saw the superhuman, spitting out phlegm, rushing out from behind the guard. Number 58 escaped. But there are also numbers 38 and 48. The battle here is not over yet. In Manhattan, New York, the financial capital, towering skyscrapers are a common sight. The Vought building stands out among these, with its mirror-like walls covered in billboards featuring superheroes. 87th floor, CEO's office. A hurried figure pushed open the door. She was wearing work clothes, had golden wavy hair, and her face, though nearing 50, still retained its charm. She was holding a tablet computer in her hand as she hurried into the room. Seeing a black man sitting on the sofa, looking down at the night view outside the window, she breathed a sigh of relief. Mr. Edgar, there's a problem at the Sages Forest Center in Pennsylvania. The blonde woman rushed forward as she saw the man. What's wrong, Madeline? I've never seen you so disheveled. Edgar, the president of Walter, who had just come to his senses, was also slightly surprised when he saw Madeline's expression. News just came from the center of the Sages Forest. A riot broke out at the testing site. One of the test subjects escaped, and that subject also possesses laser eyes and bulletproof abilities. Edgar frowned. The Sages Forest Center was a research base he secretly controlled, where he had been studying the stability of Compound 5. Madeline nervously handed over the tablet in her hand. Sir, look at this. Edgar, the true power behind the Vought Corporation, remained silent for a moment after taking the tablet from her and seeing its contents. Above is a young Asian face, standing amidst ruins. What stands out are his sharp, scarlet eyes, which constantly emit a scorching and blinding light that sweeps across everything. That all-encompassing light was almost identical to the laser eyes of the Homelanders. Edgar continued looking back, his gaze lingering on the scene where two guards fired at the Asian-looking man. The young man touched his body, and two laser beams sent the guards away. Zooming in on the video, he saw the bullet blocking his skin. Homelander. Edgar paused, his gaze lingering. Upon seeing the image of laser beams shooting from the eyes and bullets piercing the body, Edgar unsurprisingly compared it to Homelander. He looks like a carbon copy of Homelander. Madeline took a deep breath and quickly stepped forward to explain, yes, just like Homelander. The experiment department just assessed number 58's strength. Based on the current situation, the only superpowers he currently possesses besides Cyclops are his impressive physical enhancements. His laser eyes had a thermal intensity capable of melting steel, estimated at around 1600 degrees Celsius based on evidence at the scene, significantly less than Homelander's laser eyes. There was a moment of silence in the office. Edgar touched his forehead and asked, "Have you found them yet?" Madeline's expression was somewhat grim. "Not yet. Number 58 has been heading south since leaving the center of Sage's forest. He abandoned his vehicle and started walking before entering the residential area. The trip ended there. Didn't the lamplighter stop him? Madeline paused, then said, "The lamplighter is dead, his heart is charred." Edgar leaned back in his chair and slowly rubbed his temples. Things aren't too bad yet. It's just a research institute. You should be glad this guy is mentally ill. Madeline, what are you planning to do? Madeline pondered, clean up the Sage's forest, prepare the public relations department, and tell them that a severely mentally ill patient lost control and ignited the gas, causing a central gas pipeline explosion that resulted in heavy casualties at the hospital, and the lighthouse man heroically sacrificed himself to protect the patients. Edgar nodded in approval of Madeline's resourcefulness. Do as you wish. I hope to minimize the impact of this matter. Also, inform Carlton and have him relocate. He paused, then added, prepare a few homeless people for him. I want to see if he can replicate the abilities of number 58. Madeline thought for a moment, should we have Storm take a look at that research institute in New Jersey? Storm is the widow of the founder of the Vought Corporation and one of the original 7. She has a strong ability to control storms, but she is a true racist. Especially targeting black people. If it weren't for special circumstances, Madeline wouldn't want to mention this person in front of her black boss. As expected, Edgar's face darkened, and his eyes flashed with a sharp light. Madeline, it's enough to keep your sonny boy in check. Make him behave. Walter has cleaned up his childish mess many times recently. The sunny, cheerful boy was naturally referring to people from his motherland. During the last hostage rescue, he killed another hostage, and later successfully turned a suicide attempt into a murder. Because of these nanny-like cleanup tasks, Walter almost wore himself out. Madeline hurriedly nodded and left. Various departments of the Water Group began to prepare for this sudden event. At this moment, Carlton in the Waterhouse is in a pretty good mood. Because of his reasoned arguments, just now, Ms. Madeline, the vice president of the Water Group, finally approved his proposal and decided to provide him with a few normal test subjects. What struck him as odd was why they were suddenly asking him to change locations. Ms. Madeline, I think my current workplace is quite suitable for me, and I don't really want to change places. Madeline glanced at him. Are you sure? I'm pretty sure. An hour ago, something happened in the center of the Sage's forest where you are. The guards were almost wiped out. Even your student, Roger, died at the hands of that number 58. How is this possible? Carlton was incredulous. Everything was fine when he left, and the lamplighter was in charge. How could it just disappear like that? Then you'll have to ask yourself, Dr. Carlton. Hopefully, this isn't your problem. Madeline handed him a tablet computer so he could check it himself. Upon opening the surveillance video at the center of the Sage's forest, Carlton was speechless for a long time after seeing the scene. The scene was clear, something had indeed happened in the center of the Sage's forest, patients were fleeing in chaos, and superhumans were wreaking havoc. His student also died in the process. The instigator was that Asian youth, number 58. Roger Lang's words proved prophetic. The Asian youth, number 58, did indeed become a superhuman, and a rare one at that, with overwhelming abilities. Carlton's heart skipped a beat. I feel so fortunate to have somehow avoided this disaster. Chapter 9. Harris is a businessman who has long operated in the gray area of the law. He has learned to create things that everyone likes. For example, restricted drugs and firearms, or things that can be equated with US dollars. Even so, in today's society where superheroes are everywhere, there are still some unspoken taboos in their line of work. That means don't mess with superhumans. Those inhuman freaks possess all sorts of strange and bizarre abilities that make them impossible to defend against. Even the intimidating firearms they wield can sometimes become ineffective. Last time, he lost a big business deal and a brother because of a superhuman freak, and now he has no choice but to enter this chaotic neighborhood. Harris glanced at the time, stood up in the dim light, and walked into the alley they had agreed upon. Today he's meeting with some guys from the black community to finalize an arms deal. I heard from those black people that lately they've been targeted by a racist superhuman guy named Blue Eagle. It is claimed that the guy seems to have awakened a superpower that allows him to detect black people within a 10-kilometer radius, because he always manages to find lone black people. To be honest, Harris intended to terminate the deal when he learned that they were going to deal with a superhuman, even though the superhuman they were guessing had some rather peculiar superpowers. But unfortunately, they gave us far too much. It seemed there was still plenty of time, so Harris stood at the agreed-upon location and waited. However, at that moment, a strange sound came from the street across the street. Harris looked in the direction of the sound and immediately saw a strange shadow emerge from the alley. In the dim light, Harris saw the shadowy figure gradually become clearer, and then he squinted. It was a man whose entire body was black, with only his face visible as that of an Asian youth. Upon closer inspection, he realized that the man's body was completely black, as if he had been smeared with charcoal, and he had no clothes on. Could this guy be that Blue Eagle? Harris tensed up, paused for a moment, and gripped the box in his hand tightly. However, considering that Blue Eagle was probably white, and seeing him walking down the street unarmed, he felt a little relieved. However, the strange Asian youth approached him. "Wait, get away from me." Harris pulled out a silenced pistol, a dangerous glint in his eyes, and shouted angrily. This Asian youth was none other than Pei Yuan, who had escaped from the center of the sage's forest. After noticing the other's presence, he set his sights on him. Pei Yuan ignored the threat of bullets in the other party's hand. After Harris sensed something was wrong with the other party, he fired a shot directly at Pei Yuan. This was originally his backup plan against the black people, but he didn't expect to use it on an Asian who appeared out of nowhere. But he froze the next moment. The bullets from his pistol struck the man's body, but it didn't seem to have the desired effect. Pei Yuan grinned as he pulled the flattened bullet off his skin and threw it on the ground. The crisp metallic sound of the metal hitting the ground was like a slap across his face, mocking his incompetence. Harris's breathing quickened instinctively, and he felt a chill run down his spine. The other party is a superhuman. He's still a superhuman who can withstand bullets. While cursing his bad luck, Harris was already preparing to run away. "If you dare leave, I'll smash your head in. You can try if you don't believe me." Pei Yuan stared at him, his murderous intent palpable. Harris's feet froze in place. "I'm not interested in what you want to do. Find me a secluded place to stay, and I won't do anything to you. Otherwise, I'd be unsure what might happen," Pei Yuan said kindly, snapping a dagger from his waist. "A friendship or an enemy that transcends humanity, you should know how to choose." Seeing that he could reason with her, Harris breathed a sigh of relief, then cursed Lady Luck in his heart, wondering how he could have so easily run into such a jinx. Harris had no choice but to find his car, take Pei Yuan, and drive him to a secluded residence. This was already on the edge of Pennsylvania, far from the center of the sage's forest, and Pei Yuan was quite satisfied. He didn't let his guard down around Harris, but after following Harris and discovering that he hadn't done anything to report anything, he was temporarily relieved. The next morning, standing in front of the mirror in the room, Pei Yuan couldn't help but sigh as he looked at his body. Because of a night of fighting, his body was covered with bruises, all marks left by bullets. His body does indeed have the ability to protect against fatal bullet wounds, but the kinetic energy still caused him considerable damage. However, this situation was much better than before, and Pei Yuan then checked his attribute panel. Multiverse Role-Playing System. Current role, Doomsday. Template unlock progress, 10.8%. Ability. Destruction Ray, LV1, 3.8%. Superhuman physique, LV1, 8.2%. Playing value, 862. Upon seeing the final numerical value, Pei Yuan was somewhat taken aback. Before that, his acting points were only a pitiful 100 or so, but after that night of chaos, they increased by more than 700. Especially the lamplighter who died at his hands, who provided him with over 400 role-playing points, which was equivalent to a day's earnings. At this moment, Pei Yuan couldn't help but sigh. Indeed, the name lived up to its name. Destruction and devastation were the best ways to play Doomsday. He found the TV in the room, turned it on, and searched for the news. After watching several commercials featuring Vought international superheroes, Pei Yuan finally saw Pennsylvania's news of the day. The events at the center of the Sage's Forest did not take up much space. The description was quite interesting. It said that in a mental hospital, due to negligence, a severely mentally ill patient ignited the gas, causing a gas pipeline explosion that resulted in heavy casualties among the patients. The lamplighter was portrayed as a hero who bravely sacrificed himself to save mental patients. On television, Homelander expressed his regret over the sacrifice of his recently retired teammate, Lighthouse, and declared during the live broadcast that they would strengthen security measures at the mental hospital so that Pennsylvania residents could live in peace without panic. Finally, let's also take a look at the selection process for the 7th member of the Vought Super 7. Pei Yuan scoffed at this. He couldn't help but marvel at the Vought International's powerful public relations capabilities. A negative event could be transformed into an opportunity for Vought to boost the reputation of its superheroes. The hidden dark secrets were thoroughly cleaned up. While Pei Yuan was watching the news, in a room somewhere in Manhattan, New York, former FBI Black Ops Group leader Butcher was also seeing the news. Out of his hostility toward the Vought Group, he never missed a single piece of news about the Vought Group. These past few days he's seen the news about one of the Seven's team, Locomotive, hitting and killing an ordinary person, and he's planning to stir up some trouble over it. Shit, a lamplighter would die saving someone. Butcher's face was full of sarcasm after reading the contents. A year ago, the lamplighter, in order to stop his old boss Mallory's investigation into superhumans, burned his old boss's grandsons alive. This incident directly led Mallory to become disheartened and disband the Black Ops Group. The FBI subsequently sealed the files, dismissed those involved, and prohibited further investigations into superhumans. To say that this guy would heroically sacrifice himself to save people is like believing that God is gay. He doesn't believe a single word from Walter News. Walter, what are you hiding? Butcher leaned closer to the television screen, staring intently at the photo of the mental hospital on the screen, his eyes narrowed. Chapter 10. Rooftop of a room somewhere in Pennsylvania. Inside the safe house, Harris was moving several mirrors from the room to the balcony and then arranging them in a circle. This was naturally the request from the superhuman he had met last night. To be honest, he didn't quite understand what that Asian superhuman wanted to do. However, it seems that the superhuman is quite easy to talk to, as long as he follows the instructions. With the superhuman making no excessive demands, Harris only wanted to get rid of this superhuman plague as soon as possible. As for resistance, he didn't dare even entertain such a thought. That would be tantamount to suicide, a lesson constantly reminded of the fate of one of his brothers. Are there any other superhumans in these neighborhoods? Pei Yuan, having finished his meal, came to the balcony and asked the white man in front of him. To be honest, after discovering that he could greatly increase his role-playing value by fighting or killing those superhumans, Pei Yuan thought about killing some of them. Anyway, there aren't many good people among the superhumans in this world. I don't know about that. I don't usually do business related to superhumans. Harris was telling the truth. Most of the superhumans he encountered were people who couldn't communicate normally. It was perfectly normal for them to openly rob and demand things, relying on their abilities. If you don't know anything about superhumans, do you know a black-bearded guy named Butcher? Pei Yuan is currently unaware of the time frame, while he is in the heart of the jungle. Based on the fact that Storm had not yet taken control of the Sage's forest, he deduced that the time frame should be before the start of the main character's events. If he could get close to the main characters, he would naturally want to pick up a few kills along the way. For example, an invisible person. Even a retired lamplighter could provide him with so much role-playing value, so he would never give up on the head of that invisible man. Otherwise it would be such a waste, and the role-playing value gained from shooting those guards earlier was almost negligible. Butcher is still focused on killing the Big Seven, and his betrayal is not expected when he finally finds Soldier Boy to fight Homelander. Pei Yuan had always wondered if the Vought Group had some kind of mind-controlling superhuman, otherwise he wouldn't be able to understand Butcher's actions, which were even more green than a green-haired turtle. In order to save the son of his enemy, who had been cuckolded by his own wife, and to help his enemy deal with the helpers he had recruited. This makes one wonder about Butcher's mental state at that time. Recalling the impression in his mind, Harris said, "This man is very famous in the black market. He is good at fighting and can withstand attacks. It is said that he used to be a member of the FBI and is a well-known ruthless character. However, that guy is supposedly investigating a locomotive lately, perhaps because it ran over and killed a pedestrian while stopping bank robbers. Locomotive is one of the 7 giants of the Vought Group and is known as the fastest man in America." Harris simply cannot understand how anyone would dare to investigate such an inhuman being. For those superhuman beings who are not human, what difference is there between this and sending them to their deaths? Hearing this, Pei Yuan pondered. He remembered that in the original plot, the locomotive was not actually stopping the robbers. Instead, he took Compound V while transporting it, which caused his powers to go out of control and he ran over and killed Robin, Huey's girlfriend, who was standing by the roadside. Of course, none of this has much to do with Pei Yuan. His main purpose was to assess the timeline of events. If the Invisible Man was still alive, then he had a lot to offer. He didn't want to directly confront Walter yet. You need to accumulate some role-playing points first, then develop some abilities, and wait until your strength improves. After Harris set up the mirrors, Pei Yuan went inside and sat in a chair surrounded by mirrors. The surrounding mirrors reflected sunlight, focusing it all onto him. At this moment, Pei Yuan discovered that under the sun's rays, he didn't feel much heat, and he also noticed that the rate at which his performance value increased had increased to some extent. These increases are still a drop in the ocean compared to the pace of rising consumption, but something is better than nothing. After basking in the sun for a while and listening to his performance value increase, Pei Yuan looked at Harris, who was fiddling with guns inside the house, and asked, "Could you help me find out the address of this butcher, or a guy named Huey who works at a video store?" Harris looked at Pei Yuan's strange behavior of sitting in the focused sunlight and shook his head. "I don't want to get involved with that kind of ruthless character. Besides, his location is hard to find. As for that guy named Huey, there are so many people with the same name in New York. I'm not sure I can find him." Pei Yuan smiled and said, "In return, I can do you a favor, such as killing a certain opponent or a superhuman." Harris's hand trembled as Pei Yuan's words suddenly reminded him of his brother who had been killed and the superhuman scum who had stolen another batch of his goods. He had to admit that the words of the Asian youth in front of him were somewhat tempting. After a long pause, Harris said, "There's a guy named Nelson, his nickname is the Timberwolf. At the same time, a Waters Security Department in Pennsylvania." "Oh shit, Jake, what the hell did you bring back?" Wilson of Walter Security looked at the guy one of his men had brought back from outside and exclaimed in surprise. He was clearly a normal young man with fair skin, but his face was covered with long, curly hair that obscured his features. What stands out most is the long nose that bulges out from between the face, resembling a dog's nose. It makes the person look like a wild dog that came out of the mountains and forests. Nelson, the Timberwolf, has an extremely keen sense of smell, even more so than the most sensitive dog, his henchman named Jacques introduced him. After Subject 58 escaped, Homelander came over for a while but found nothing. Thinking about cracking down on piracy, he immediately left. Naturally, no trace of number 58 was found. Wilson searched almost the entire surrounding area, but found no trace of it. So he sent his men to find some people with a keen sense of smell to see if they could locate the man. After all, the Vought Group had given him a death order. If he couldn't find number 58 who escaped from the lab, he would have to resign as the head of security. Upon seeing the person in charge, Nelson immediately held up 2 fingers. Looking for someone? $2,000. The Vought International signs superheroes based on whether their image and abilities meet Vought's requirements and whether they are given appropriate packaging. However, many ordinary superhumans are not doing well, and Nelson is one of them. Because he has taken to a new drug, he is currently short of money. Wilson glanced at him, said nothing, and had his men bring out the clothes that test subject number 58 had worn before. In his 20s, an adult male. Nelson twitched his dog-like nose, sniffed the clothes in his hand, and looked at Wilson. Wilson nodded in satisfaction. Find this man, and I'll give you $4,000. Chapter 11. Wilson's payment pleased Nelson greatly. $4,000 was enough for him to splurge for a while. So after noting down the scent of the clothes Wilson had taken out, Nelson began to deliberately wander around the neighborhoods of Pennsylvania. He considered himself a gifted individual blessed by God, and indeed possessed an unimaginable sense of smell, constantly being disturbed by the surrounding odors. It has deteriorated considerably since its initial version, but it is still sufficient for finding people. All right, we've finished cleaning 2 blocks today. We'll check again tomorrow. It's just a pity there aren't any easy targets like last time. After a day of searching, Nelson was a little tired and decided to rest for a while, so he took a dozen beers and went back to his lodgings. However, as soon as he entered, Nelson frowned and sniffed the air forcefully. Although the layout of his house hadn't changed and his belongings seemed to be mostly intact, he could smell something in the air that didn't belong to him. Interesting. Someone actually wants to cause me trouble? And there's an aura about them, it seems somewhat familiar. Nelson put down his beer, opened the drawer, and found that all his remaining money had been taken. A cruel smile appeared on his face amidst his surprise. Nelson unscrewed a bottle of beer and took a swig. Then open your nasal cavity completely, sniff hard at the scent trail in the air, and let it move in a certain direction. He wanted to show that guy what would happen if he messed with the timber werewolf. Does this really work? Inside Harris's safe house, Harris observed the commotion outside and couldn't help but wonder. The two had gone to look for Nelson, but when they found he wasn't in the house, they climbed inside for a quick look around, and then came back. They deliberately left behind a lot of scent along the way. According to the Asian youth, they were planning to wait for the prey to come to them. You said Nelson's nickname is the Timber Werewolf, and that his sense of smell is more sensitive than the average person's, and that sensitivity might cost him his life. Pei Yuan wasn't sure if the werewolf would find this place, he was just taking a gamble. Harris thought there was a high probability that the other party would be able to find it. After all, those superhumans didn't like others running wild on their territory. And Nelson has always been ruthless. He would likely not let the opportunity pass him by. In the past, he would never have dared to make a move on such a superhuman. After all, besides his renowned sense of smell, Nelson also possessed a beast-like physique, making him virtually unbeatable for ordinary people. But after witnessing Pei Yuan's ability to block bullets, he had no more worries. Superhumans possess a wide variety of abilities, but those who can withstand bullets using their physical prowess are extremely rare. According to his previous investigation, the so-called Timberwolves was not one of them. The bait has been laid, now it's just a matter of seeing if the other party will take the bait. Then, Harris would take his binoculars every few minutes to carefully examine his surroundings, as was his professional habit. After all, compared to a superhuman's invulnerability, he still had to be careful, otherwise he wouldn't even know how he died. "They're here, they've found us." A figure suddenly appeared on the street outside. Harris immediately muttered something when he saw this, especially when the other person opened their eyes to look at him. Pei Yuan looked in the direction of the voice and soon saw the werewolf that Harris had mentioned. It's not that he has particularly good eyesight, but rather that this guy's face is really conspicuous, covered in hair, and the hair is especially long. What stands out most is the long, dog-like nose on its face. Perhaps he's more suited to being a dog man than a werewolf. Nelson didn't realize that the other party was waiting for him to take the bait. When he arrived at Harris's safe house, he just felt that he was very lucky. The goddess of luck finally favored me. Otherwise, why would he have accepted the task of helping Walter find someone, only to have things suddenly take a turn for the better after several days of fruitless searching? Nelson remembered that familiar aura. It was clearly the target that the Walter security team leader was looking for. "Once I confirm that the target is inside the house in front of me, then the $4,000 will be mine. Praise be to Lady Luck." Nelson muttered something to himself, then swaggered over. As for the degree of danger, Wilson did not disclose the extent of the danger to the person for the sake of confidentiality. Therefore, the information Nelson currently has is that he is just an ordinary petty thief who stole the property of the Vought Group. To him, an ordinary petty thief without superpowers was nothing more than a piece of trash who could eat. He didn't think he was inferior to a piece of trash by his own means. After all, he was a forest werewolf and relied on more than just his sense of smell. Inside the house, Harris was also taken aback when he saw the Timberwolves swaggering towards him from the opposite side. The other party made no attempt to conceal their intentions and showed almost no sign of wariness. Then I realized that this also fits the nature of most superhumans. Their mindset changes, and they are mostly fearless and indifferent to ordinary people. If he were just an ordinary person, that werewolf wouldn't be so scary. Boom boom boom. There was a knock on the door. Harris glanced at Pei Yuan, who nodded. Harris then carefully opened the door, immediately retreating to a distance. Nelson walked into the room, saw Pei Yuan's face, his expression shifted, and then he swaggered over and pulled up a chair to sit down. Judging from the state of the room, Nelson knew that the Asian face was someone who was talking. At the same time, he also smelled that familiar scent from the water branch, confirming that the person in front of him was the target he was looking for, and he couldn't help but grin excitedly. "Oh, kid, do you know who you've messed with? You dare to steal my things? If you know what's good for you, cut off one of your hands. Is your nose real or fake?" However, he did not receive a response. Instead, he saw the other person staring at his nose with a mocking look, a look that was like a sharp sword. "Looks like you are looking to die, kid." Nelson understood that this arrogant fellow needed to be taught a lesson and shown what respect was. Poof! Nelson clenched his fists, and a sharp bone spur protruded from between his fingers, making it look like he was raising his middle finger. He grinned cruelly. He swung his fist out suddenly, determined to pierce a hole in his opponent's body. As his target, he wouldn't kill him, this attack would only cause him pain and cause him to bleed a little more. He has a lot of experience in this area. However, his expression froze the next moment. His bone spurs pierced the other person's body as if they were cutting through a steel plate, unable to penetrate even an inch. Instead, the intense pain was transmitted from the bone spurs to his arm. He raised his head subconsciously. Seeing the other person's ambiguous smile, she winked at him. "Your superpowers don't seem to be of much use." The other person also revealed a cruel smile that was exactly the same as his, but even more cruel than he appeared. Chapter 12. Did we run into a tough opponent? Nelson's heart skipped a beat. He instinctively tried to pull his fist back, but the next moment his wrist was locked in place by a tremendous force. The bone spurs between his fists were gripped by his opponent's hand, as if held in place by an indestructible steel clamp. Click! A crisp sound. Pei Yuan snapped the bone spur between Nelson's fists. Ah! Who the hell are you? Who the hell are you? Nelson's pupils dilated suddenly, the intense pain contorting his face as he let out a shrill scream. Does it matter who I am? Pei Yuan smiled at him, toying with the bone spur still stained with blood in his palm, then glanced at his other hand. Nelson was immediately filled with panic. He noticed the ill intent in Pei Yuan's eyes, covered his wound, and hurriedly retreated in terror. Pei Yuan stepped forward and grabbed the other person's head. Terrified, Nelson tried to resist, but Pei Yuan's wrist pressed his head against the hard marble tabletop, instantly turning it into a bloody mess. The next moment, Pei Yuan shoved the long bone spur directly into his temple. Puff! The werewolf's body trembled violently a few times, and the light in its eyes gradually dimmed. I think it would be better to call him Dogman. Pei Yuan flung aside the werewolf's corpse and disgustedly wiped his blood and brain-stained wrists on the body. The forest werewolf died a gruesome death. The head was pierced by a bone spur and emerged from the other end, with the semi-fluid white substance gurgling out from the gap. Seeing the swift and decisive scene, Harris, who was watching from the sidelines inside the room, couldn't help but swallow hard. If he hadn't witnessed it with his own eyes, he would never have believed that such a powerful superhuman werewolf could have its brain pierced in less than 5 minutes. He was now extremely glad that he had acted wisely and hadn't considered having any ulterior motives towards the Asian man. He suspected that the man could probably take him down in less than 10 seconds. I've taken care of the person, you handle the body, Pei Yuan said to Harris, wiping his hands. For someone who operates in the gray area, disposing of a corpse is no different from going out for a meal. Harris nodded, immediately and efficiently removed the blood and cleaned up the traces, then carried Nelson out of the body bag and put him in his trunk. Finally, we drove to the countryside to find a place to treat it. Pei Yuan sat alone on the sofa and began to sort out his gains. That's right. He just killed a superhuman, which increased his role-playing value. Now his role-playing value has reached over 1,000. As required, there's still a considerable amount of progress to go before unlocking the next stage, 20%, but that's enough to upgrade one ability. Pei Yuan doesn't yet possess Doomsday's super-powerful evolutionary abilities, so he still needs to hesitate between the Destruction Ray and the Super Body. One focuses on strengthening attack, the other on strengthening defense. Their priorities are different, and this is something worth considering. However, after thinking about it, Pei Yuan decided to focus on defense first, since his defense wasn't really that strong at the moment. Even Starlight, who is about to join the 7 giants of the Vought Group, is not as good. At least when Starlight was hit by Butcher's Barret, he only fell to the ground and didn't even break a layer of skin. And now, he still gets swollen from being hit by bullets flying from all directions. However, just as he made his decision, the anonymous cell phone that Harris had prepared for him rang. Upon receiving the caller ID, Harris's voice came through. I was dealing with the Timberwolf's carcass when I found a signal locator. Locator. Harris's tone was somewhat grave. I investigated this guy before. He always keeps to himself, but this locator is strange, it shouldn't be something he needs. What's the meaning? In other words, he likely has teammates now, and the locator was destroyed in the fight just now. Harris's tone was rather serious, and Pei Yuan instantly understood what he meant. Because the locator signal had disappeared, Nelson's partner might come looking for him. Hearing this, Pei Yuan was actually looking forward to it. He hoped that many superhumans would come to his door to replenish his energy. Thinking of this, Pei Yuan went to the window, pulled back the curtain a little, and began to look outside, intending to see where Nelson's teammates were. However, this look immediately made him serious. At this moment, about 500 meters away from Harris's safe house, a rugged-looking SUV is parked under a large tree. The tall security team leader, Wilson, was using a microphone to direct his arriving teammates. The Timberwolves' signal disappeared at house number 37, so observer, you need to keep a close watch on him and make sure he doesn't get out of our sight again. Several days earlier, when he was working with the Timberwolves, he had them bring a signal locator. They claimed it was to find him, but in reality, they were constantly monitoring the Timberwolves' signal status. Although I don't have high hopes for this guy. But having fought against Experiment 58 in the heart of the Sage's Forest, he knew just how powerful Experiment 58 was. If the forest werewolf were to encounter him, it would only meet its demise. The Timberwolf was his bait. He was the hunter hiding in the bushes. All he needed to do was wait until the werewolf in the forest died and the signal disappeared. Just over 10 minutes ago, he finally got to witness this exciting moment. 6 vehicles, in groups of 4, are converging on the center of the location from 4 different directions. Wilson's teammates in the off-road vehicle had all disembarked, forming a small team of 4. The first 2, holding black shields, slowly advanced towards the target location. Wilson smiled with satisfaction as he looked at the black titanium alloy shield standing in front of him, shielding his teammates behind it. The experimental department of the Vought Group building has assessed the destructive combat capabilities of Experiment 58 based on the scene at the Sage's Jungle Center. Based on his most destructive and threatening laser eye, a damage assessment was also conducted, with the upper limit being a heat ray of around 1600 that can melt most steel. With intelligence, one can then selectively target specific individuals. Wilson immediately reported that he needed a batch of reinforced shields that could withstand the number 58 heat ray. In less than 2 days, this batch of specially reinforced titanium alloy shields arrived in their hands. According to the experimental department, the shield can withstand heat rays of at least 2500 degrees Celsius. According to previous information, that kid couldn't completely withstand the damage from bullets. So, in his eyes, that somewhat troublesome Asian hedgehog had become a molten porcupine. Chapter 13. Inside Harris's house, after Pei Yuan vaguely saw the shadowy figure of a stranger in the woods and felt an inexplicable sense of unease in the environment, Pei Yuan then understood everything. It's likely that the so-called werewolves in the forest have already been recruited by the other side, or they came here on their behalf. It's all about finding one's own existence. After noticing the other party's presence, Pei Yuan consciously began to search for the group that was surrounding them, and soon spotted several small teams that were tiptoeing and quietly approaching. These teams still came from various directions. We are determined to capture them all. These people are truly relentless and determined to fight to the death. Pei Yuan's eyes flashed with coldness as he looked at the armed groups that were closing in. Nobody wants to be a guinea pig anymore. Since these people dared to come, he'll just keep sending them to their doom. A red light surged in Pei Yuan's eyes. Team leader, the target has spotted us. The target has spotted us. The first squad, who were leading the way and had already approached the safe house by more than 10 meters, suddenly spotted a figure near the curtains in the living room and saw a faint, eerie red light. The first squad leader felt a jolt in his heart and immediately reported back through his headset. Change tactics, launch a direct assault. Throw gas bombs first. Upon hearing the report, Wilson gave a cold order, his voice trembling with unease as he heard the first squad leader's voice. Wilson added, stay hidden behind the shields and keep pushing forward, he can't break through our defenses. Team leader Wilson's calm voice gave the squad immense confidence, especially after seeing the shields blocking their way. Those superhumans have great abilities, but they are not insurmountable. Moreover, the threat posed by the other party is far less than that of Homelander's powerful superheroes. The armed men hiding behind shields deftly pulled out gas grenades from their waist pouches, unplugged them, and threw them into the house. Boom! The next moment, 2 beams of heat shot out from the house in front. It hit the gas bomb that had just left his hand with perfect accuracy, and with a loud bang, the gas bomb exploded. Thick smoke billowed away. Oh shit, damn it! The people approaching from the front quickly put on their gas masks. The next moment, a crimson heat beam pierced through the thick fog ahead. The first two teammates holding the shields were extremely helpful, standing directly in front, while the two following behind immediately pulled their heads back. Two beams of heat swept past the group, but landed on the black shield in front of them, emitting a chilling hissing sound. Laser annihilation. The black shield was almost completely intact. The team members were stunned for a moment, then broke into ecstatic smiles, their joyful voices coming through their earpieces. Ha ha ha, that brat's laser is useless, the shield blocked it. Upon hearing the voices coming through their headsets, the teams all breathed a sigh of relief, and their moods relaxed. The fact that their most threatening weapon has become harmless is something they should be happy about. Sensing the relaxed atmosphere among his teammates, Wells' expression also softened. Kids, don't let your guard down. Everyone, advance. 6th Squad, get into position quickly. Save your RPG shells for that brat. Although the Vought Group had given him a strict order, he did not want to use heavy weapons unless absolutely necessary. At this critical moment when the Vought Group is trying to intervene in the Department of Defense, they also need to maintain a certain degree of low profile, otherwise the follow-up work will be a rather troublesome matter. He wanted a sniper with high caliber damage, rather than an RPG rocket launcher. Or perhaps, those damned sevens. However, those guys are currently focused on cracking down on piracy gangs that infringe on their film and television merchandise interests, and they won't listen to the orders of a mere security team leader like him. Roger that. Roger that. Hearing the recovery message through his headphones, Wells nodded and continued to take control of the situation. As the thick gas fog dissipated, a look of surprise flashed in Pei Yuan's eyes upon seeing the unharmed Walter squad. The opponent actually blocked his attack. Pei Yuan's gaze sharpened, somewhat surprised, but then he saw the two charred marks on the surface of the two shields, which were half the height of a person, and instantly understood. It was clearly in the heart of the Sage's forest that his powerful laser-eyed attack was discovered. These squads came prepared, the special shields that could withstand his heat vision and high temperatures were the source of their confidence to come again. Haha, that brat's out of options. Let's kill him. Upon seeing the target personnel standing still, who were then probing with two more laser beams, the armed groups let out a knowing, maniacal laugh. Nothing could be more satisfying than them turning the tables and becoming masters of their own destiny. God knows how suffocated they were by that damned brat back in that mental hospital. Da-da-da. We are close to our goal. At Wells's command, the area around the house became quiet. Suddenly, as if by prior arrangement, at the same moment, a dense barrage of gunfire erupted from all directions, the smoke from the gun barrels almost condensing into clouds. The sudden gunshot startled the residents near the house, who then habitually closed their doors and windows and made themselves a cup of coffee. Then I sat back on the sofa and watched my favorite show while waiting for it to end outside. Shootings happen every day in America, which is always a good thing. There's nothing special about these gunshots, except that they're a bit noisy. Countless bullets flew in from all directions, rushing towards the first-floor lobby and shattering the well-lit floor-to-ceiling window. While dodging the bullets, Pei Yuan's eyes continued to search various hidden locations outside. He was skeptical, knowing that he could defend against bullet attacks to a certain extent, yet still relied on bullets as his primary means of attack. Sure enough, Pei Yuan's search quickly revealed a pair of people subtly adjusting their positions on the roof of a building ahead. One of them was carrying a huge rocket launcher on his shoulder, its dark opening being adjusted for direction. Pei Yuan instantly understood, without a doubt, this was the opponent's true trump card. To be honest, he's not even sure if he can withstand a single rocket attack. However, judging from the current intensity, it is highly likely that it will not work. Even if he can withstand it, he will probably only be in a state of temporary survival. But that state was something Pei Yuan couldn't accept at the moment. Once he loses his ability to resist, he will once again become a pathetic lab rat in the Vought International Laboratory. Pei Yuan's eyes swept across the panel in the room, and the number on the thousands place disappeared instantly. Then, an even more intense red light emanated from around his eyes. So, can you still withstand this 3,000 degree heat vision? Pei Yuan, amidst the hail of bullets, walked to the window. He looked at the black reinforced alloy shield bearers on the roof, who were blocking the rocket launchers behind them. Amidst the thick smoke and fog, a sinister smile curled at the corner of his lips, and two eerie red lights flickered in his eyes, like demons crawling out of hell. Chapter 14. While Wilson, the security chief of the Water Group, was arranging for the various teams to gradually surround Pei Yuan. After dealing with the werewolf's corpse, Harris returned to the neighborhood where his safe house was located. Wilson's team was large and made quite a commotion, so it was impossible to avoid Harris's attention. 100 meters away on a secluded street, Harris stopped and parked his pickup truck on the side of the road. Sitting in the driver's seat, he had his hands on the steering wheel and was staring intently at the direction of his safe house. Hearing the continuous gunshots coming from the other side, this man in his 40s had an uncertain expression on his face and was filled with inner turmoil. He swore he hadn't felt this conflicted even when he was killing that bitch who cheated on him with a superhuman man. He's now considering whether or not to help that Asian kid. To be honest, as a black market dealer, that house was just one of his several safe houses, and the owner's identity was fake. He could simply turn around and leave. Those strange people just couldn't get to him no matter what. And now is the best time to get rid of that Asian kid. But he hasn't left yet. It's unclear whether it's some kind of ambition, or perhaps the other party avenging his brother by striking him with a claw, or other emotions that have kept him here. Or perhaps a strange feeling told him that if he turned around and left now, he would regret it. Damn it! He himself did not understand why he had such strange emotions. I must be out of my mind. Hearing the continuous gunshots coming from that direction, Harris turned the key with his right hand, gripped a pistol in each hand, lit them, and prepared to drive over there. Just then, a blinding beam of light ripped through the empty street ahead, followed by a towering explosion at the other end of the beam. Oh shit, I'm fucking seeing things. Damn bastard. How are we supposed to fight now? As Pei Yuan's figure appeared at the window, revealing his body as the thick fog dissipated, the armed squads prepared for the attack paused briefly. Then came a burst of deafening profanity. Hearing the cacophony coming through his headset, Wilson, who was observing the situation from the top of the off-road vehicle, couldn't help but move his binoculars to the target location. Upon seeing the figure standing at the window, Wilson couldn't help but curse, shit. At this moment, their target, the Asian youth standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window at number 58, was wearing a rather bulky black outfit. The familiar decorations and colors clearly indicate that they are also using bulletproof vests. Damn it, where did he get a bulletproof vest? Wilson probably never imagined in his life that he would encounter such a formidable opponent. Even with such strong physical fitness, he still wore a bulletproof vest. The moment he saw the bulletproof vest, he felt his blood pressure rise. Throughout his career, he has encountered some rather difficult superhumans, and on several occasions, he has managed to handle those unruly factors with ease. This is also why Walter placed him in the center of the Sage's Grove. However, he had almost never seen anyone like number 58. His years of dealing with superhumans made him realize their nature. Most of them were overly arrogant because of their abilities. Those who consider themselves God's chosen ones possess an innate sense of superiority and a natural aversion to weapons like handguns. They avoid using them whenever possible. There's no one like number 58. What's the panic? It's just a bulletproof vest, you all better calm down, he can't kill us. Looking at the target through the binoculars, Wilson roared at his teammates. The deafening roar instantly snapped them back to reality, and they unleashed a torrent of bullets from their guns, trying to blast away the bulletproof vest first. Seeing his teammates regain their fighting spirit, Wilson was very satisfied. Then, noticing the target's gaze, he remembered the location reported by the 6th team. He immediately reminded her. 6th Squad, take cover. 6th Squad, take cover. The target has spotted you. 6th Squad, received. After withstanding the attack, seize the opportunity to fire. At this moment, the shield bearers of the 6th Squad also noticed the target's movements. Without needing the team leader's reminder, he steadily placed his shield in front of him as soon as he saw the target's gaze directed his way. He then signaled to the rocket launcher operators behind him to adjust their positions. Through the viewing glass frame in the middle of the shield, the Asian youth was seen. The shield bearer smiled and leaned closer to the headset. He joked, "Look, look, look. What do I see? I see a yellow-skinned monkey trying to give us a sunbath. Then I think you should thank him. That's what we should do. We'll send him to meet our god later. He should be happy, because he might be able to see his mother." Ha ha ha. A burst of unrestrained laughter came through the headset, and the atmosphere became relaxed again, with no one taking the target's heat vision seriously. Upon hearing the voice through his earpiece, Wilson, who was in the SUV, couldn't help but smile. He was already imagining finishing the job, finding a seat at the neighborhood bar, and enjoying a leisurely drink. At that very moment, Pei Yuan, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, also locked onto the position of the rocket launcher. Without further hesitation, a surge of emotion welled up in his eyes, turning them bloodshot. Two blazing red rays shot out from his eyes, instantly severing the metal utility pole blocking the middle of the building. An unstoppable heat gaze surged toward the black shield on the roof. "Boss, something seems off." The shield bearer of the 6th team keenly sensed that there seemed to be something different about the target's laser eyes, before he could finish speaking. The reinforced alloy shield blocking his way was instantly melted and vaporized, and then pierced through his body. The massive shockwave carried it more than 10 meters away before it crashed onto a rooftop. Even the rocket artillerymen in the rear were affected, one of their legs melted off and evaporated, leaving behind a black, charred, and smelly wound. "Ah! My legs! My legs!" The next moment, a deafening explosion rang out, and the sound in the earpiece abruptly stopped. In an instant, the noisy and bustling public channel became completely silent, like a deathly quiet street at 2 or 3 in the morning. 6th Squad. Is the 6th Squad here? 6th Squad. Those present had no idea what had happened to the 6th Squad, which consisted of only 2 people on the roof. They could only frantically call out into their headsets. Finally, a faint response came through the headset. "The shield failed. The gunner is dead. I think I saw my mother." The faint voice abruptly ended, but the amount of information contained within it sent chills down everyone's spine. They stiffly turned their heads and saw the Asian youth in the tattered bulletproof vest jump off the windowsill and walk towards them amidst the shell casings on the ground. As he walked, a sinister smile gradually crept up his lips. "Isn't anyone going to come out and greet me for my new performance?" Chapter 15. The eerie voice echoed throughout the venue, like the sound of hell from the depths of the earth. Each word felt like a stone pressing down on their hearts. The oppressive atmosphere was suffocating them, pushing them to the brink of collapse. "You damned bastard! I'm going to kill you!" Finally, one of the blackguards couldn't withstand the immense pressure. He picked up his rifle, removed it from his shield, and started spraying Pei Yuan with bullets. His rifle ultimately proved useless. Some of the bullets were stopped by the remaining bulletproof vest on Pei Yuan's body, while others lingered on him for a while longer. In the end, not a single one could be injected into his body. Pei Yuan glanced over and saw the arrogant black man instantly cut in half at the waist. The 2 sides of the severed body were pitch black and emitted a burnt smell in the air. "Oh shit, this damn freak!" This brutal scene sent chills down the spines of the surrounding armed forces. Their anger made them ignore the advice of the 6th Squad, and they instinctively raised their shields, frantically pulled the triggers, and emptied the magazines at Pei Yuan. It seemed that only in this way could they dispel the fear in their hearts. Da-da-da! Ding ding ding! Countless bullets hurtled towards Pei Yuan, leaving his bulletproof vest tattered and mangled. The remaining bullets struck his exposed body as if they had hit the hardest substance. The bullet's tip twisted and deformed rapidly before falling to the ground with a crisp sound. Pei Yuan's clothes were covered with countless bullet holes. The familiar throbbing pain spread from the spot where the bullet had hit him. Pei Yuan opened his eyes wide, and his bloodshot eyes flashed with a crimson light once more. Two beams of light, radiating intense heat, shot out from his eyes and swept across the front row of armed personnel. With a chilling hissing sound, the 4-person team at the front, along with their alloy shields that even bullets couldn't penetrate, were cleanly cut into 2 pieces. There was a clang. Half of the shield fell to the ground. Then came the bodies, split in 2 like collapsed building blocks. A feeling called despair began to spread in everyone's hearts. Even the cold guns in their hands couldn't give them enough sense of security. Retreat! Everyone, retreat! Wilson roared into his headset, his face flushed, as he watched the one-sided massacre unfolding in the distance. The bullets were ineffective, the gunner's fate was unknown, and even the reinforced shield he had initially relied on had lost its ability to provide resistance. Nothing could withstand the opponent's laser eyes that swept everything away and slaughtered indiscriminately. He didn't understand what had happened. Was the experimental department's assessment of the target's strength wrong, or had the opponent's laser eyes been further enhanced? But at this moment, deeply shaken, he couldn't imagine any other way to break the deadlock. Despite using every means at their disposal, the guy was almost unharmed, and their operation was a complete failure. Wilson's roaring in the headset had almost no effect. Just as he finished speaking, another small team, as fragile as paper, was neatly sliced up like a cake. A strong smell of blood filled the air. The battle continues, but the roles have reversed. They are no longer playing the role of attackers, but rather lambs to the slaughter. A crimson light swept across the area. Gunshots rang out repeatedly. The angry curses that had been coming through the headset suddenly disappeared, and through the binoculars I watched as my teammates were sliced in half, some short and some long. Wilson's eyes were bloodshot. These. But they were all his closest friends and relatives. He must get his revenge. With bloodshot eyes, he jumped off the roof of the off-road vehicle, picked up his rifle, went to the driver's seat, and started the engine. Then he stared intently at the Asian youth who was indiscriminately slaughtering people in the field. Turn around and leave. To run that freak over with a car, you'd have to be practically insane or have lost your mind. Halfway away from the battlefield, the gunfire in his earpiece suddenly stopped. The eerie silence made Wilson feel as if he were drowning, nearly suffocating, almost going mad. The sound of his footsteps, in particular, seemed to pound on his heart, making it hard for him to breathe. His heart raced, his face contorted, then he grabbed the earpiece hanging on his ear, threw it away, and gasped for breath. The outcome of the battle on site was no longer in doubt. After Pei Yuan upgraded destructive vision, the damage was increased, and some shockwaves were added. Those armed troops wielding alloy shields were instantly rendered powerless to resist, and were wiped out by him as easily as cutting melons and vegetables. The scene was a mess, with severed bodies and limbs